Hi everyone, welcome to part 1 of the Greek mythology timeline. Over the coming weeks we're going to explore the characters and events which have helped to shape this epic narrative, from its primordial origins to the rise of gods, mortals and kings. This is one of the most comprehensive myths in the world, along with the Hindu epics, the Celtic cycles and the Norse sagas. Because of this, I've split this particular graphic into 2 parts. Part 1 focuses on the supernatural beings of ancient Greece, including the gods, nymphs, oceanids and monsters. Part 2 will examine the Age of Heroes, where the gods of the old world take on a more supportive role, while their prodigy go on to clear the lands of monsters, tyrants and corruption. Many of the world's myths are incredibly long and detailed, covering the creation of the cosmos, epic battles, romantic escapades and heroic quests. And very often these events can cover hundreds to thousands of years. Due to the scope of these epic narratives, many mythographers have separated them into different eras, which are sometimes referred to as suns, ages or yugas, depending upon which system you're looking at. In this particular podcast, I'm going to examine the ages of man, which are based on the works of Hesiod, a poet from ancient Greece. These ages cover 5 eras of human existence. If you take a look at the left-hand side of this graphic, you'll notice a dark region which I've called the Age of Creation. This isn't a part of Hesiod's work, but it's a very useful way of unpacking this graphic, as it will help us to establish the backstory of Greek mythology. We begin, as so many myths do, in an age of darkness and void. From out of this nothingness, several gods emerged. These deities were crude elemental constructs, more a personification of nature than the anthropomorphic figures we're used to. They represented the basic properties of nature, such as the cycles of night and day, the breadth and depth of the earth, or the mists and tides of the sea. These beings have been referred to as the Protogenoy, the first gods and goddesses to emerge out of chaos. You can see from my legend that these entities were the embodiment of the earth, sky and sea itself, and when they coupled, they sired whole new races of elemental beings. What I found interesting when creating this graphic was how similar this design process was to a game I played years ago called Doodle God. In this god simulation, you start with 4 basic elements: earth, water, air and fire. You then mix these elements together, forming more rudimentary structures, such as swamps made of earth and water, lava composed of earth and fire, or steam, which was a mixture of fire and air. From these secondary elements, you could then go on to create more complex structures again, such as dust, metal, or even lightning. In much the same way, the Protogenoy were able to create other, more rudimentary beings, such as the Titans, who added more texture and detail to the cosmos. Take for example Crius, who represented the stars in the night sky, or Oceanus, who turned the waters of chaos into a great ocean. When this second generation of Titans coupled with one another, they continued to sire more complex and interesting beings. 2 cases in point would be the Oceanids, who represented fresh water and mountain springs, or the Nymphs, who personified the forests and meadows upon the land. The Age of Creation, then, was a time of emerging complexity, where the Protogenoy created all the attributes that define our natural world. This primordial age came to an end with the fall of Uranus, the Skyfather in Greek mythology. We'll explore more on his demise in another chapter. But with his downfall, the Age of Creation came to an end, and the Age of Titans began. This period was called the Golden Age, which brings us to the opening part of Hesiod's work. This is where we are introduced to the first race of humans. They were created by the new sky god, Kronos. His human creations were said to have lived for thousands of years, never knowing sorrow or hardship. No one needed to work because the land was abundant with fruit, vegetables and water. So there was no misery or envy, as everyone was provided for. Spring never ended, skies never darkened, and the world remained lush and fertile. When the people of the Golden Age died, it was described as a very peaceful experience, similar to falling asleep. However, death was not the end of this race, for in their passing they turned into daemons. Now this isn't a demonic term as you might expect. In ancient Greek, the word daemon means a guardian spirit. These ancient souls were incredibly wise, and they eventually became protectors of the mortal world. This concept is very similar to ancestor worship, where the elder spirits of a tribe continue to guide and protect their descendants in later ages. In due time, this age also came to an end when Kronos was usurped by his own son Zeus. Again, I'll explain more about this story at a later date. All you need to know for now is that after a great battle between the Titans and the Olympians, Zeus and his family went on to rule the cosmos, ushering in the Silver Age. During this period, Zeus sired a whole new generation of humans, but this silver race was an inferior adaptation. They were said to be plain in appearance, unwise, and less noble than their predecessors. Another change was the introduction of 4 seasons, that being spring, summer, winter, and autumn. These weather variations created additional hardships for the silver race, who now had to work all year long, planting in the spring, harvesting in the summer, and collecting wood in the autumn in order to see themselves through the harshness of winter. However, it wasn't all bad, as the silver people still lived a relatively peaceful existence. They were able to play for 100 years under the tutelage of their mothers. When they eventually grew up, their lives were somewhat short, making adulthood a very brief phase in their lives. When they died, they became known as the Blessed Spirits, making their homes in the underworld. Again, after many eons had passed, the people of the Silver Age came to an end. In their decadence, they had stopped honouring the gods, so Zeus decided to kill them for their impiety. This catastrophic act ushered in the Bronze Age. During this era, Hesiod says that Zeus created men from the ash tree, which was considered to be a hard and durable wood. Sadly, the men of this age proved to be cruel and barbaric, favouring strength and war over peace and prosperity. They lived on meat and dairy instead of plants and grains, and they built their homes and tools exclusively out of bronze. In due time, Zeus grew disenfranchised with his creations yet again. Over the years they had become wild and rebellious, and some had even dared to steal from the gods. He decided to wipe them out in a great flood, bringing an end to the Age of Bronze. When the spirits of the Bronze Age passed into the underworld, they were locked away in a prison called the Dank House of Hades. This was done to prevent them from causing any more trouble in the worlds above or the realms below. However, 2 of the Bronze Age mortals did survive, and they went on to sire the rest of humanity, of which we are said to be a part of today. This new lineage established the people of the Iron Age, which Hesiod split into 2 parts. The first part is called the Heroic Age, which is defined by the heroes, kings, and demigods who ruled over ancient Greece. During this time, the gods and nymphs take on a more secondary role, either as supporting figures or as rival enemies. The heroic figures of this age included Perseus, Theseus, and Oedipus, who fought some of the most formidable creatures in Greek mythology, including the Minotaur, Medusa, and the Sphinx. Many of these heroes also featured in the Iliad, with characters like Odysseus and Achilles laying siege to the city of Troy. When these legendary figures died, they often found their way to the heavenly realm of Elysium, where they lived a happy and blessed existence. The second part of the Iron Age took place in Hesiod's time, between 750 and 650 BCE. The poet described it as an age of wickedness and corruption. He believed that the gods of the old world had abandoned his people, who had become selfish and immoral. Children dishonoured their parents, brothers fought one another for power, and the social contract between guest and host was forgotten. During this age, humans no longer felt shame for their wrongdoings. Babies were said to have been born with grey hair, while piety and other virtues were almost non-existent. Indeed, Hesiod predicted that Zeus would someday destroy his people, just as he had done with the previous generations before. So in summary, Hesiod's 5 Ages of Man describes a long and continuous decline of moral integrity, tracing the lives of humans from a state of primitive innocence to one of sin and corruption. Some scholars have noted that Hesiod wove the stories of Greek mythology with the political reality of his time. This makes it a cautionary tale, one which he hoped his listeners would take note of. Perhaps it's a warning that we can take note of ourselves today, for in the age of fake news, social inequality, and overconsumption, we may ourselves be heading towards a catastrophic collapse. That brings us to the end of the 5 Ages of Man. In my next podcast, I'll take you back to the Age of Creation, where we'll learn more about the Protogenoy, who helped to give shape and form to the cosmos. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, do hit the subscribe button. Additionally, if you want to be notified the moment I drop a video, then hit the notification bell as well.